Okay. Hi, guys. My name is Cortland Jacoby. I'm here for Punch Drunk Critics. And I am with a very special guest today. You've seen him act on College Humor and direct bits for The Late Late Show with James Corden. Now, director, writer, and star of the horror comedy Scare Me, Josh Ruben is with us today. Yeah, woo-woo. Thank you so much for speaking with me. I absolutely loved the film. I thought it was a really, really great first feature and a great start to your feature film career.
Thank goodness. Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
Talk to me a little bit about the origins of this story. You have this overarching narrative of two writers trying to like one up each other, plus the individual stories that they tell. You have like a lovable horror fanatic turned pizza guy. You have this, and then you also have this very timely tale of like white male privilege and mediocrity. How did all of those elements come together in one cohesive package?
I keep saying it's sort of a three-prong confluence. The first of which was the beginnings of the Me Too movement, and I was sort of frustrated with, comedic heroes like Aziz Ansari being outed for their sort of power tripping to take advantage of women.
Right. Regardless
of the details of that story and how that sort of netted out, I started sharing stories of, there were stories that were coming out, not just about him, but just about the Me Too movement in general and about toxic masculinity, sort of the beginning of 2018. And a lot of women were reaching out to me going, thank you for being an ally. Thank you. And all I was doing was hitting the share button.
Right.
Not a lot of other guys were doing even that. I was having a lot of discussions with women who not only were taken advantage of, physically, but who'd endured many a degree of gender dynamic with white male privileged dudes plowing through them and over them. I actually just did a video recently of like male coworkers talking over their women coworkers on Zoom, and it absolutely blew up because this is the common trope. I also did women interrupting women on Zoom,
right.
But these are very, very real sort of elements. So specifically, I wanted to shine a light on the competition gender dynamic between a man and a woman, specifically when a woman is more successful than he, and what that does to a man who cannot self-soothe. But without making it preachy, I knew from a business perspective, I wanted to make a horror movie, something with limited resources, something with a single location, something that would be a sound designer's film, and creature effects. We didn't have it, and ultimately make a movie that I could spar opposite great actors, have it be super, super funny, specifically with an actress who would get to do something different than she perhaps had done before without being over-sexualized opposite her male counterpart in any way. So there's, little to none romantic storyline. It's more about competition and drive and the creative process.
If there is like a romantic storyline, it's completely in your character's mind, which I absolutely love. How did Aya Cash, who plays that female, and Chris Redd, who plays the pizza delivery guy, get involved in the project? Because
Aya Cash is the wife of a good friend of mine I've known for ages, and they have a place near my hometown where we shot the movie. And so she was my first choice. I essentially was like, hey, I want to make this movie in my hometown. Do you want to work as a local and spar with me and do this, little winter movie? And she, thank God, trusted me. I think she'd seen some of my stuff and was like, what the hell? I'd just come off a You're the Worst. He was looking to do something different. And Chris came aboard because my managers represent him and were sort of like, I don't know if you know him, and I didn't quite know his work at the time, but he just won an Emmy for his work on SNL, and he's going to blow up. Yeah. And we had an awesome lunch meeting where he just, before he even took his coat off, he was like, I love this and I want to do this. It's like, you can do this. I would love to have you. He brings it to a whole other level.
the way you use sound in this film is extraordinary, and I would say it's some of the best folio work in recent years. Tell me a little bit about the creation and evolution of that, because it is so essential to the story.
Well, the production company, Irony Point, run by my producers Dan Powell and Alex Bach, they own a post house. They're under the same umbrella as Great City Post in New York. So Ian Sinus and John Moros, two incredible sound designers, sound engineers, they were excited to come aboard a small movie, having worked on the giant projects that they've done from Netflix to, big movies, because this is a different kind of film. And so the process was sort of like, hey, I want to create each story. I want to have kind of a different feel to it. So there's the cabin sounds, there's the sounds of the storm and the wind and the whistling through the floorboards, but that all sort of falls away when we go into story mode. And the sort of rule of the film is that the more in flow each character is with their stories, the more sort of transportive the stories become, the more that those elements sort of manifest. So, we took swings. I mean, I like erring on the side of minimalism, especially in horror films. I keep coming back to Insidious specifically. I feel like James Wan did an awesome job with Insidious, not just with Joseph Bishara's soundtrack, which was, sort of a style I encourage my composers to sort of base from inspiration-wise. But just in horror too, just sort of like what's the littlest amount we can get away with while making you feel sort of transported. There's a rule in comedy that I love, which is never get caught trying to be funny.
Right.
And I didn't want to get caught trying to, overdo it with the sound, but still have a difference between the real world cabin situation and when you're transported to these other stories.
Were all those sounds in your mind when you were writing the script, or like did it kind of like evolve as you were working with these sound effects?
That's a great question. I would say a good majority probably were. I didn't quite know if I wanted to do things like pitch shift Aya's voice to move in and out of characters, but I sort of realized in the edit, per my editor Patrick Warren specifically, he's like, that's going to take away from Aya's performance, and you don't do it for you, or you aren't planning on doing it for you. So unless it's sort of a through line rule, let's just have us be the self-generators vocally for everything. So it truly becomes truly becomes about each actor's talent and what they can physically bring to the role. And then sound can be something everyone else can kind of, bring in. But, there were all kinds of small things I didn't quite know how consistently I'd use them, or to necessarily to what degree, and you kind of find that in the edit a little bit. I didn't know that Aya's character, for the grandpa story would be Russian, and that informed the soundtrack of that story. That informed the sickness piece of it. Those sorts of little elements. I didn't think of the office sounds necessarily in the troll story. It was like, oh yeah, that's going to make you feel like you're in an office.
I read this on the internet, and I don't know if it's true or not. Read that you are from DC. Is that right?
I was born at George Washington University Hospital, yeah, but I grew up in Potomac, Maryland before moving to Woodstock.
Okay, so technically you're from the DC DMV area,
right? Yeah, technically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of memories from that time? Or were you?
They're mostly, my brother, my sister, 9 years my senior, my half brother and sister. So those memories are mostly bound to wandering around like the incredible museums as a little kid, the Smithsonian, and those kind of those performance spaces. My mom sold theater tickets, so seeing theater performances at one of the gigantic theaters down there. There's like the one.
International, or yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Kennedy Center. And I think that's also why there's a musical number in the film, and why I'm such a musical person. My family's very musical. My uncle plays in the New York City Philharmonic, and my aunt was an opera singer, and the other an actress. My sister's a musician. So I think Washington and probably, going to going to the Kennedy Center to see, musicals from an early age. I think that was kind of, the an influence on me, but as was the exorcism steps in Georgetown.
Yeah, I was gonna ask because I'm actually in like from DC and from this area, so that's why, and a lot of our readers are from that area, so that's why I'm asking. And I also read that you fell in love with horror and comedy before, or with horror before you fell in love with comedy. And I was just wondering, I feel like growing up in this area has its own specific kind of horrors, like just being around politics at such a young age in general. So I was just wondering if that influenced the movie at all.
I think I was pretty young. We though I was born in DC, I grew up for the most part in Potomac, so it was very suburban, more of like, oh, I don't know, Stranger Things, It Follows kind of a neighborhood rather than the city proper. But my memories of a city like that when I was young was the kind of cobblestone streets and dark corners, and that sort of confluence with the nostalgia. And also because I think Exorcist is probably one of the earliest films that I'd seen as a kid. So talk about formative and impactful. So that kind of soup, knowing that I'm from an area where this like, visceral, iconic horror film was shot, and knowing that I'd been there and knowing that it was real, but it wasn't real, and that it was a movie, and that I'd seen it physically or walked on those very steps, I think had some kind of probably subconscious impact. But I'm not, I got a 950 on my SAT, so I'm probably not, the best to adapt political horror. I'll try.
Well, no, you've done really, really well. I appreciate what you've said so far. Josh, thank you so much for joining me. I really
thank you so much. Yeah, Cortland, it was a pleasure.